Welcome to Inspired Changemakers, a podcast about all the amazing things people are doing to make the world a better place. This podcast is about creating change and the moments that inspired our guests to activate. My name is Julia Healy, and I'm the CEO of United Charitable. Stay tuned to be inspired. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. This podcast is really about making change and kind of what activates you to really go ahead and fight the good fight.
Yeah, I love it.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, man, that's a loaded question, boy. I have a couple of very humble beginnings. Both my parents are Liberian immigrants who came here to Atlanta in the early 80s. And yeah, like I said, we just are people of faith, humility, hard work, determination, and those are my roots. You know, born and raised here in Atlanta, and a big part of my life was started playing football at the age of 10 years old, and that really changed my life. Met my Little League coach who, you know, was basically like, if you've seen Rocky, he's like my Mickey, and introduced me to the culture of Georgia football, and that became my dream. And through lots of hard work, through an amazing community, lots of mentors, lots of amazing people, including him, you know, I was able to achieve that dream, and was fortunate to play at University of Georgia. After overcoming a lot of adversity, I was not supposed to be there. Was labeled undersized. Like I said, was first in my family, or in the entire generation of my family to do what I did.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, was able to overcome a lot to be able to get to University of Georgia. Became a 3-time All-American and Buckets Award finalist, and, you know, lots of awards and accolades, you know, as a result of just my teammates, coaches, and so many people that once again just poured into me, and made it to the NFL. And things started out great, but ended up getting cut after my second year, and that really changed the trajectory of my life. So at that point is when I really began working on myself, on who Rennie Curran was outside of just being an athlete, and started reading tons of books, going to workshops, going to, you know, just anything that would really help me to understand self and really focus on leadership mindset and things like that. And from there, you know, went on to play for a few other teams, but ultimately I found a new passion in my calling, which was speaking, and which is crazy because it was something that I'd always done, being that I was a captain on a lot of the teams I played on. So it was usually giving a speech here and there, would speak to Little League teams and different things like that, but it became a big part of my life. And so, you know, that is what I do full-time now. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm an author, written 2 books. And also a leadership coach. So my company's called Game Changer Coaching. So I work with entrepreneurs, executives, and athletes, helping them reach their fullest potential.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me, what gives you the belief that things or people can be changed?
Man, my own life. My life, the people around me that I've seen change, like my father, you know, just, man, that's what gives me that inspiration, that hope, and just knowing that the things that I've experienced, like I said, I didn't come from a lot. I faced just so many things in my life that made me question my own identity. And so to go through that experience and then have so many people that came in that said one thing that just changed my perspective just a little bit, whether it was a teacher that just believed in me, or whether it was my pastor, or whether it was a coach that challenged me, or somebody that mentored me, you know, through all those different experiences. Like when I look back, I can't recognize that Rennie from even 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Crazy.
You know, so I know for a fact that, you know, people can change, and it's not going to happen when you want it to, right? It's all about those incremental gains. It's all about the small moments of progress that lead us to the biggest change.
And so, especially when we're in the philanthropy world and dealing with trying to create change, what really activated you to say, I'm going to be a leadership coach, I'm going to mentor people, I'm going to help people reach their fullest potential?
Yeah, it really was a result of my journey. And I truly believe that the things that we go through in life, that especially the challenges and I call it the game-changing moments.
I like that. Game-changing moments. I love that.
The game-changing, defining moments.
Yeah.
That's what really gives us, when you look back over your life, that's what gives you your blueprint. That's what gives you your framework to where you can add the most value and make the most impact. And I work with like a lot of clients who they're confused about their personal brand and like how they're supposed to take their different areas of expertise and their different experiences, and bring it all together and be able to explain it in a way that makes sense and allows them to monetize it and add value. And the question I always ask them is, if you had a movie director that came to you, or a journalist, and said, hey, I want to write a major story on you. Give me the 3 to 5 major moments that led you to where you are now. What would those be? And every single time when they tell me those 3 to 5 moments, it has a recurring theme that relates to not only, just the framework of how they can provide value, but also a certain target audience that they can best reach as well. So that's, when I look back on my life, that gives me that blueprint of, how I can provide value, and the audience that I can best provide value to.
And you know what I struggle with as a leader, since I have free coaching right now, is just kind of the imposter syndrome. And I think people deal with this all the time, where they don't think they're enough. They don't think they're enough to make a change. They don't think they're enough to lead. And how do you help people work through that?
So I really help people get clear on their vision, their values, and their mission. And I think when you have imposter syndrome, a lot of it is because you're not secure in one of those areas.
Right.
When you get clear on your values, like what you stand for, what you believe in, and not just what you believe in, what are your convictions?
Right.
If somebody's put a gun to your head and say, hey, what are you willing to die for? Right. What are you willing to stand on, regardless of the outcome, right? Right. Like, what are those things that you know. Right. If you're not clear on those things, when you get in front of people, you're not going to be certain. You're not going to be confident in yourself and able to articulate anything, unless, of course, there's money, or there's like something that is certain that you can see. Yeah. But when you have to go by faith, and when there's the outcome is uncertain, that's when things like your convictions and your values and your vision and your mission become so important. Because that's what really is going to be there when things are not going right. When things are falling apart, when you're hearing a million no's, you got to lean back on those things, on that strong foundation.
And social entrepreneurship, right? There's not always a definite equation for change, right? Yeah. We want to see this change in a community. Mm-hmm. But if we do this, what will this happen? You can't predict everything. Right. So how do you lead people through the fact that, just starting to work on yourself, regardless of how fast you're, right? Like, because I want the formula. I want to get there in 2 months. Rennie, right now, like we have a 2-month plan. Like, how do you teach people to be patient with themselves?
Yeah, I always give them this analogy, and it's something that we all experience every single day. We all have a phone with an app on it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, hey, think about Instagram, think about Facebook, think about TikTok, think about all these platforms. They all started with version 1. Version 1 does not look like version 1.2, and version 1.2 doesn't look like 1.5. So this is the first version, and you have to, when I give them that analogy, it kind of, I always see that sigh of relief, like, okay, so you mean I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have my brand name exactly right. I don't have to have my target audience exactly right. I can make iterations, and I can improve it over time. Yeah. And so that's one of the ways that I try to get them in the mindset and the perspective of understanding that, hey, this is going to take time, and that's okay. Like, you're going to eventually get to that nice, finished, polished product that you want. You just have to keep making the iterations.
I'd like to thank United Charitable for sponsoring today's Inspired Changemakers podcast. United Charitable is a national nonprofit that focuses on guiding you on your charitable journey. Whether you like to simply streamline your giving or you like to create your own charitable initiative, United Charitable has the knowledge and resources to support you. If you'd like to learn more, check out the link in our bio. And what impact do you really want to have?
Man, the biggest impact that I want to have is on leadership. Like, that's one of the most important things I truly believe in our lives, like, is leadership. If you think about it, every aspect of our lives, our families, when we look at our families, whether our families are dysfunctional or not, whether it's happy or healthy or not, organizations, whether they thrive or not, whether they fall apart when there's adversity or not, right? A team, whether they succeed and win a Super Bowl or not, I could go on and on. It all has to do with leadership and culture and things like that. So that's the biggest thing. The impact that I want to have is on leadership and helping people understand that they are leaders. Whether you're a young kid that, like me, I was an annoying little brother. Yeah. And, the one who got in trouble for everything. So for a long time, not only because of the position I was in my family, but also just how my identity, how I developed that as a result of what the messages I was receiving from society. Like, I did not see myself as a leader at all, and my perception of leadership did not look like a good. It was not a good thing. Like, it was like, I got to be the ladies' man. I got to be this.
Right.
I gotta be funny.
Yeah.
And so those were the messages that I was sent. So just really shifting that, especially for athletes and those who have a platform, helping them understand that they can be so much more than just that title. And it goes beyond being an athlete. It's like, whether you're CEO, whether you can go beyond being whatever that title is and whatever the world tells you that you should be because of that title. That's the legacy that I want to leave.
And I think leadership is so important because you can really, if you actually study it, you can do the ripple effect and you can do the math about what a good leader can build, and then what it can create for other people's. And, being the CEO of my company and all of our employees, and I think about in 5 years, how many more people are we going to be able to bring into our environment that's going to be able to create and help people create their legacies?
Oh man, it's so powerful. And I'm glad you brought that up. Like, I just shared this not too long ago on my social media, but we recently celebrated my grandfather's 90th birthday. And we
Congrats.
did thank you. Yeah, I mean, powerful. And we did a group photo with all of my family members. And I just thought to myself, and I told him this, I'm like, Grandpa, like, if you hadn't made certain decisions in your life, like, a lot of us in this picture would not be here. And like, I don't think a lot of times we realize that as leaders and as people in general, that the decisions we're making day in and day out is literally tied to somebody else's destiny and their legacy. And it can be the smallest thing, like your decision to start that business, your decision to go to college. My grandfather was literally the first person in his entire generation to be educated.
It's crazy.
So through him, my mom was able to come to America, and my dad followed. And I was born in just so many like you said, ripple effects, and it's just powerful. And I think that's such a powerful example of the opportunity that we all have in our lives.
And really, as social entrepreneurs and seeing, I feel that I am the luckiest person in the world because I get to support all the people that are hands-on really doing the work, right? Yeah. I just get to inspire people and talk about the light that inside them and what causes really they're fighting for. So tell me, your cause is really, you work with a lot with kids, right? And like mentoring. And so tell me a little bit about your program.
Yeah. So my foundation is called Game Changers Foundation. And really the main goal is to help athletes become leaders in sports, business, and life. And we do a lot of work with young kids and youth and everything. But what I've seen and what I've experienced personally is that through the work that we do, because we also partner the young kids with former athletes. And so a lot of the former athletes that we're partnering them with are the ones who are transitioning. And I mean, like myself, I went through my transition. It was extremely tough. And it's one of those things where you're questioning your identity, you're questioning your purpose, you're questioning your worth and your value. But when you have the opportunity to pour back into that next generation, help that next young kid to navigate the same challenges that you navigated, all of a sudden you have a sense of purpose, you have a sense of belonging and value, and it's twofold. So I look at it like we're impacting the next generation of young athletes, helping them to leverage their platform or understand how to leverage their platform and become leaders. But also on the back end, we're helping former athletes as well who are looking for that sense of purpose, who are looking to not just feel like they wasted all those years in their career in vain because they didn't get to their 10th year professionally, or they didn't make it professionally, right? Like providing that purpose. So it's so powerful just thinking about that. And I did the interview with Hannibal Navies and Charlie, but Hannibal is one of those guys for me. Like he poured into me so much, and is one of the reasons why I do what I do now. And when I think about guys like him and Jesse Tuggle and Ray Lewis and so many who gave me the blueprint, it's like, man, if I know what they did for me, so I know what I can do for that next athlete. Especially the one that's in the, small town, population 1,000, one street light town who, everything around him is environment is telling them like, there's no reason for you to keep striving and moving forward. And it's not just sports wise, but when he goes home, it's tough. Life is just challenging. Those are the kids that, I really, really am trying to reach most.
I was lucky enough to go to as I said before, I'm a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan. I was lucky enough to go to Rodney McLeod's football camp. And it was the first time that I ever sat in the bleachers and listened to like the high school students talk about Rod. He had a bunch of professional players. Malcolm Jenkins was there. It was awesome. Yeah. But I sat in the back and listened to what the kids said. He's not that big. He's not that tall. I could be faster, right? These were like 15 to 17-year-old boys. But all of a sudden, they started changing their talk about what was possible for the rest of their life just by meeting somebody that thought enough about them to come back and continually put on programs. Yeah. And you think about that ripple effect. What really would you like your ripple effect to be?
Yeah, that's it, man. That exposure, that belief that when they see me, and that was my story in a nutshell. Like I was 5'10" and a half, with braces going to Georgia. And everybody, every newspaper article, every expert, every recruiting person was like, this dude is not about to play linebacker in the SEC. Like, it's just
not happening.
It's not happening. And same thing in the NFL. So I became, when I did make it, I realized that I wasn't the only one that made it. Like, every kid that was doubted, every kid that was devalued, every kid that was told that he wasn't big enough, they made it as well too. And so I was a spokesperson for the underdogs. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what I want my ripple effect to be, that when somebody sees me, whether it's a kid here in Georgia or a kid in my family's home country, Liberia, that's in a village, that they see me and they believe.
And was philanthropy something that was always in your family? Like, what is your earliest memory of philanthropy?
Man, my my earliest memory of philanthropy was, when we were in our 3-bedroom apartment growing up, and I didn't know much about it, but there was a civil war that was happening in my family's home country. It's a country of 4 million people. Over 300,000 people lost their lives. And, millions became displaced, became refugees and whatnot. And a lot of those refugees were my cousins and my uncles and my aunts and so forth. And so my earliest experience with philanthropy was seeing what my parents were doing. And they didn't have a foundation.
Right.
They just cared. And they just knew that they had an opportunity. They had a platform. They had their jobs. And so they took their resources and they, most of the time split it in half, and they sent what they could, or they opened up their homes. And, my mom would be up. She was a nurse. Before she get on the road to go to her job, she's cooking a big pot of food. And that was my earliest experiences. Our home was always open. It got annoying sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, but our home was always open and everything. And that just became what I knew. And
And I think it's so funny how as kids, we don't realize that. You're right. It got annoying. For me, we're Italian and my mom would cook sauce and we'd bring sauce to people. And I was like, nobody wants your sauce, Mom. But I didn't understand, what she was teaching me in that.
Right.
And, fighting to make the world a better place is not an easy fight, right? Sometimes you are going to be rejected. Sometimes you're not going to get the donations that you want. So tell me, how do you keep telling yourself, what do you keep saying to yourself to keep yourself fighting?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is leaning back on, like I said before, on my mission, my personal values, what I stand for, my vision of what I believe is going to happen. I'm not going to say what can. I believe it is going to happen. Those are the things that I lean on. And, I just think about those moments in my life that were just so defining and so convicting that it's it don't matter what happens.
Right.
It just keeps me going forward. And I believe we all have to have that. I call it having your fuel. And, my fuel, I talk about it a lot whenever I go out and speak, but is when I went back to my mother's village, or I went back to Liberia. I took the whole family.
Oh my God.
Yeah, after my first year in the NFL. And it was one of the, changed my entire life, changed my perspective and everything. So we got there.
How did it change your perspective?
Just making me realize how blessed I was, number one, and making me realize what could have been. And,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, just when I got to her village, we were having a celebration, and everything was going great. But about 30 yards away from our celebration, and seeing all my family I never met before and all these things, there was a group of kids who were playing soccer. And I mean, you couldn't tell these kids they weren't in the World Cup. They were intense. They were going hard. Some of them running barefoot. Some of them, the goalie was wearing blue latex gloves. to cover the goal, and he had this intense look in his eyes. And like, when me and my sister were watching him as we walked over, and they all stopped and they just ran up to me and to me and her, and just the look in their eyes of just inspiration and hope. Like, I'll never forget that. That wakes me up every single morning. And just seeing them and knowing that, like, that could have been me. Like, I could have been that kid that was in a remote village that was never discovered. It just so happened that my mom came to America and got a scholarship. And so my life's goal, like, I'm hoping that, the Game Changers Foundation doesn't just stop here, that it eventually we're able to establish something in Liberia, a state-of-the-art facility where they can go and train. Like, I had the opportunity to. I had a trainer that let me train for free. I want to be able to provide that for them. Like, let them train for free, give them an opportunity to be able to get exposure and leverage their talent, and maybe get a college scholarship and maybe be able to change things for their family and pay it forward as well.
And how important is for you to have the right people around you?
Oh, it's everything. It's everything. I mean, I definitely can think of, we can all think of, right? Those people around us growing up who said the most encouraging things, and the people around us who said the most damaging things that still stick with us today. Yeah. And when I think of people, like you talked about imposter syndrome, and you talked about all these, a lot of it stems from those people who we had around us that planted those negative seeds of doubt and, low self-esteem or whatever the case may be. And so it is so crucial that you surround yourself with the right people, and it's contagious. Right. Either side is contagious. If you get in a room full of people with ideas and inspiration who are high energy, you're going to feel it. It's undeniable. And the same thing is true for the opposite. Like, you get around people who are negative, and eventually you're going to add in.
And so why do you think, because I have experienced two moments in my life in the professional athlete realm, that I have never felt anything like so inspired in my life. And I happened very lucky that I was in the arena when Allen Iverson did his crossover to Jordan. Oh, wow. And I have never in my life felt that feeling of such victory and triumph and hope and I've love. Like, it was straight love, right? Because we were just so happy. So why do you think professional athletes kind of can bring that?
Man, that is a great question. I think when you're watching an athlete perform, like, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, it's like you're almost living through them. Like you're role playing. I mean, in our minds, we all are like athletes in some capacity.
Yeah, of course. So, I've played for the Eagles a lot.
No. Oh yeah, like visually, mentally, and it's just like the platform. It's the atmosphere that's created. It's the fact that, like, you have this setup where everybody is connected, and the collective energy is what creates that inspiration in that moment of triumph. And just seeing somebody, the struggles, the triumphs and the struggles. It's not just about the wins. It's about the fact that they lost 2 weeks ago. Exactly. But now they got another opportunity, and they do something a little bit different. And then it's the fact that you are seeing what I believe, like, harmony in the world can look like. When you have people. Explain that to me. Yeah, when you have people of different walks of life who are all striving to achieve one goal. Yep. Like, I think that taps into something in our soul, within us, that inspires us to, when we see that in real life. And it happens in multiple ways. When you see a company do something amazing or create some innovation that brings people together and they win, or you see a country come together after a major loss or something bad happens, you see people come together. It just taps into a part of you. And I think that's what sports does for people as well, in a different way.
And I really do think professional athletes have such an amazing ability to use their influence and their brand to highlight causes. Yeah. How did you pick your cause?
Yeah, what I said before, it was a result of my own personal experience, and something that I genuinely believe in. And, just thinking about the fact that mentorship was a huge part of me getting to where I'm at. Exposure was a major part. And then when it came time to me to transition, a big part of it was that professional development and the leadership development. Yeah. So all those three components is how I've been able to craft my framework for my foundation.
But you had to be coachable.
And
And I think that that's so underrated right now, especially as I'm hiring employees and I'm hiring the younger generation. Yeah. Being coachable, it's a hard skill to develop.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have to really be able to sit down across from somebody and be vulnerable with what you're struggling with. How do you allow that?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the greatest things that being an athlete taught me, because you have to be coachable if you want to progress. You have to know how to work along with that coach, how to communicate with them, how to understand their mindset and their perspective, and their mannerisms, because they may tell you, like, one coach may tell you how to do something, another coach may how to tell you how to do the same thing, but he wants it done in a smaller, specific way. And so if you don't understand him and how he's feeling on that day, like, you're not going to get on the field. And then on top of that, no matter what you do, you're hearing feedback. So whether I had a great day, whether I had a horrible day, regardless, I'm getting that same level of feedback every single week. And so I'm being challenged every single week to improve. And then I have the film to also reinforce that as well. And
I couldn't take that. I'm just letting you know. Like,
I tell people that all the time. I'm like, imagine if you were at work and you had a camera that was following you around every single day, and then you had to watch that at the end of the day, watch your film on yourself and your performance and how you interacted and how you communicated, how much better you would be. And so when you start to get in that that groove of getting that constant feedback, you start to crave it. Like, if you really want to be great, you know that this is what it takes. And you almost, it's like the opposite. Like, when you don't hear feedback, you almost worry, because you're like, dang, do they really care about me?
And do you know what was hard for me too as a leader is that I would see potential in people and I would want them to achieve what I thought they should achieve, right? Because I'm like, oh, you're so good at this. Let's really like develop this. And it was not always what people wanted for themselves.
Yeah.
So I had to spend a lot of time really learning how to let people lead their growth journey at times, and then push when I needed to, but not all of the so tell me about your books.
Yeah. Man, so the books, that came into play when, like I said, I was a free agent.
Yeah.
I was cut. I was back home. I was just trying to figure it out. And that's when I really had that perspective shift, understanding that, man, I could actually leverage this time. I can actually use this to pour into somebody else. And that was the kind of impetus, or the spark that encouraged me and inspired me to really start writing. It started out as journaling, but through that process, I realized, man, like so many people are going to be in the same place. I thought about my father. My dad was an entrepreneur. My first example of entrepreneurship. He lost his business when I was in around 12 years old, and I saw how his mindset shifted because of the fact that he didn't have that title of being that CEO or being a breadwinner. How it shifted his identity and how he saw himself.
Right.
And how that happens to so many people, whether they go through a divorce, they lose a business, they lose their job, they forget who they are. And so the book Free Agent really talks about how we all go through that moment of uncertainty and transition, and how you can actually use that to build yourself and really realize what matters most in life. So that was the first one, and it was such a transformational experience and so fulfilling. Like, I remember when I first released it, I got a email from a soldier in Afghanistan. Like, I just started getting all these random messages. Yeah, just like the ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
Like, he had just finished his security post, and he was like, yeah, I read your book, and, we stayed connected. Like, just crazy experiences like that, that never would have happened if I hadn't taken that chance. So it was a powerful, powerful experience.
That is my dream, by the way. I would love to write a book just about.
You should.
Yeah, it's just like the thought of it is overwhelming, and we'll talk about that offline. But but just really, because I get to be around so many people on how they create their legacy and how they connect with people and how they create their community. Yeah. And I think it's amazing if we focus on the good things, right? And and I love finding everybody's light is different. Yeah. Right. Like, some people really want to fight for dogs, right? They want to no more stray dogs. Yeah. And I just really enjoy that. So I am super impressed that you wrote a book, because that is just such a daunting.
Thank you.
And then I just have a couple more questions before we're going to end it today. So, but really, if you had to say that, I know you mentioned some football players, but who's inspired you the most?
Man, that's a great question. I got so many thoughts running through my mind. I mean, of course, I immediately, of course, like, there's guys who inspired me when I was playing. Yeah. The Ray Lewises, the Jesse Tuggles, Brian Dawkins, like we talked about before. Yeah. But honestly, I really think about those trailblazers, the Jackie Robinsons and Muhammad Ali's and guys like that, who, like, man, they were so much more than athletes. And they are just, when you think about them, you think about their level of conviction and the fact that they didn't have to do that. Like, they had the notoriety, they had the fame, they were killing it, they were winning, but they stood for something that had nothing to do with that sport.
Right.
And they used what they had, man, to really, really stand for something that's so much bigger. And the legacy that they left, man, it's like you can talk about their wins and the losses and the big fights, but man, the mark that they left on humanity, like, wow, that's powerful. And so they're the ones who really, really inspired me.
And how do you want to be remembered?
And I said this before, I definitely want to be remembered as that guy who maximized all his gifts and his talents. He left nothing on the table. He got every single thing he could out of all the gifts and talents and the relationships that God gave. So that's how I want to be remembered, is somebody who maximized their calling.
And so how I became CEO of United Charitable in 2019, and then 6 months later we go into COVID. And so I'm interim CEO, and I'm, the board is evaluating me, all these things, right? And we go into COVID, and I'm like, okay, what is the next step now? When you get thrown with those curveballs like COVID, or like really when you're talking about your journey, what do you do to keep people around, to keep your community?
Yeah, I mean, it really starts before that. I one of the principles I live by and believe in is you got to win the game before the game. And that's like one of the aspects is, how are you preparing before those big moments? What is your mindset like before those big moments? What is your team and your relationships like? What are your routines like before those big moments? Because it's not something you can just step into and now all of a sudden you shift and you get into alignment. Like, nah, it's all about your routines. It's all about your repetition and conditioning and different things like that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
And do you know what I also had to learn? I had to learn how to let go of the outcome.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because I was so afraid to try things in COVID, because I was like, oh, is this going to work? Is this going to work?
Yeah.
And I had to let go, because there was no way. I'm such an analytical person. So I'll tell you, my undergrad is finance and accounting. I have my MBA in finance. So all I want is numbers and analytics around why things will succeed, right? Or my risk percentages. But I really had to learn to kind of let go.
Yeah.
So how did you do that? How have you let go of you were, when did they, okay, I'll say this, for a professional athlete, how old were you when you really started to being looked at for being a professional athlete? Like,
man, I was 19, 20, yeah, I was a child.
And how did you learn to kind of like let go of that? Like,
faith had a big part to play in that. Like when I shifted, and this started in high school, when I shifted my perspective from like trying to hit these numbers and trying to get the scholarship and trying to, impress the scouts or whoever was coming to look at me, to playing for an audience of one. Yeah. And that really, really took a lot of that pressure off. And, it allowed me to know that I'm not playing for these people. I'm not playing necessarily for the fans. I'm honoring God with my gifts and my talents. And that, as long as I'm doing that, like that kept me on the right pace to know that whether I win, whether I lose, regardless, this isn't about just the external. It's not about the scoreboard. It's not about the statistics. Right. It's about, am I honoring God with my gifts and my talents and being a good steward of what he's given me.
That's awesome. All right. So for our listeners, where could they find out more information about your foundation?
So through the website, it's GameChangersFoundationGA.org. And then, of course, if you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me on Instagram, on LinkedIn. I will respond. So don't be surprised if I hit you back. So, yeah, those are the easiest ways.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really, I'm going to love watching your journey, and just really the definition of an inspired change maker, somebody that really fights hard through not only their career, but their philanthropy. So
yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Find Inspired Changemakers on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and comment on all the awesome things you are doing to make this world a better place. Don't forget to subscribe.